The sea was both a pathway and a challenge. Along the rugged coastlines of northern Europe, where icy winds swept across deep fjords and towering mountains cast long shadows over narrow valleys, a remarkable people emerged. They would become known to history as the Vikings, fearless sailors, skilled craftsmen, determined explorers, ambitious traders, and formidable warriors. For centuries, their longships crossed vast oceans, reaching lands few Europeans had ever imagined. They founded settlements, established trade routes stretching from North America to the Middle East, and left a legacy that still echoes through history today. Long before the Viking Age officially began, the ancestors of the Vikings lived throughout Scandinavia, a region that today includes Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. This northern land was unlike the fertile plains of southern Europe. Winters were long and harsh, with heavy snowfall, freezing temperatures, and limited farmland. The growing season was short, forcing communities to make the most of every summer. Life demanded resilience. Families built sturdy wooden houses with thick turf roofs that helped protect against the bitter cold. Large fires burned constantly in the center of these homes, providing warmth, light, and a place for cooking. Entire families often shared a single longhouse, living alongside valuable livestock during the harshest months of winter. Smoke drifted upward through openings in the roof, while stories, songs, and legends filled the evenings. Agriculture formed the foundation of Viking society. Farmers cultivated barley, oats, rye, and wheat wherever the soil allowed. They raised cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, and chickens. Fishing was equally important, with rivers, lakes, and the surrounding seas providing cod, herring, salmon, and other fish that could be dried or salted for storage. Hunting supplied deer, elk, bears, seals, and birds, while forests offered timber, berries, mushrooms, and wild game. Every resource mattered. The environment taught people to waste nothing. Animal hides became clothing, bones became tools, wood became ships and homes, while iron extracted from local bogs was transformed into weapons and farming equipment. Viking society was built around family and community. Most people lived on independent farms rather than in large cities. Extended families worked together to survive. Men generally handled farming, hunting, fishing, construction, and warfare, while women managed households, prepared food, made clothing, supervised servants, and often controlled family finances when husbands traveled. Compared with many other societies of the time, Viking women possessed relatively strong legal rights. They could inherit property under certain circumstances, request divorce, own land, and manage businesses. Although society remained largely male-dominated, women played essential roles in maintaining both households and local economies. Children learned practical skills from an early age. Young boys accompanied fathers into fields, forests, and boats, learning farming, fishing, hunting, and eventually weapon training. Girls helped mothers with weaving, cooking, food preservation, and household management. Storytelling also formed an important part of childhood. Around evening fires, elders passed down legends about heroic warriors, clever gods, dangerous monsters, and distant lands beyond the horizon. These stories shaped Viking identity. Honor, courage, loyalty, generosity, and reputation stood at the center of their values. A person's name and achievements mattered deeply. Great deeds could earn lasting fame, while cowardice brought shame not only upon individuals, but upon entire families. Leadership within Viking communities rested with local chiefs, often called jarls. Wealth, military ability, family connections, and reputation determined influence more than formal titles. Jarls protected their followers, organized defenses, settled disputes, and led expeditions overseas. However, Viking society was not ruled by kings alone. Many important decisions were made at assemblies known as the Thing. Free men gathered regularly to discuss laws, settle disagreements, witness legal agreements, and resolve conflicts. These meetings represented one of Northern Europe's earliest forms of community-based governance. Disputes were often resolved through compensation rather than endless violence. Families negotiated payments for injuries or deaths, attempting to prevent blood feuds that could last generations. Although revenge remained part of Viking culture, legal traditions helped maintain stability within communities. Religion deeply influenced every aspect of daily life. Before Christianity spread across Scandinavia, Vikings followed the ancient Norse religion. At its center stood a rich collection of gods, giants, magical creatures, and heroic legends. The most powerful god was Odin, associated with wisdom, poetry, war, and sacrifice. According to legend, Odin sacrificed one of his own eyes in exchange for knowledge and hung from the great world tree Yggdrasil to gain the secrets of magical runes. His son, Thor, became the protector of both gods and humanity. Armed with the mighty hammer Mjolnir, Thor battled giants who threatened cosmic order. Thunder rolling across the sky was believed to be the sound of Thor's chariot crossing the heavens. Another important deity was Freya, associated with love, beauty, fertility, and war. She received many warriors who died bravely in battle, sharing this honor with Odin. The trickster god Loki occupied a more complicated role, sometimes helpful and clever, sometimes destructive and unpredictable. Loki's actions eventually contributed to the coming of Ragnarok, the legendary final battle in Norse mythology. Unlike many religions that emphasized eternal peace, Norse mythology accepted that even gods faced mortality. According to prophecy, Ragnarok would bring enormous destruction. Gods and monsters would fight a final battle before much of the world was destroyed. Yet from these ruins, a renewed world would emerge, symbolizing cycles of destruction and rebirth. The Vikings also believed in numerous supernatural beings. Giants represented powerful natural forces. Elves inhabited hidden realms. Dwarves forged magical weapons beneath mountains. Spirits protected homes, forests, rivers, and ancestors. Religion was not confined to temples alone. Sacred groves, springs, and open-air gathering places often served as locations for sacrifices and ceremonies. Animals were commonly offered to the gods, while important festivals celebrated seasonal changes, successful harvests, and military victories. One of the most fascinating aspects of Viking culture was the use of runes. Runes formed an alphabet known as the Younger Futhark during much of the Viking Age. Unlike modern writing systems used primarily for books, runes appeared on stones, weapons, jewelry, wooden objects, and monuments. Some inscriptions marked ownership. Others commemorated fallen relatives or celebrated great achievements. Rune stones erected throughout Scandinavia continue providing historians with valuable information about Viking families, expeditions, and beliefs. The Vikings also developed remarkable skills in craftsmanship. Blacksmiths forged sharp swords, axes, spears, helmets, and farming tools. Jewelry makers created beautiful brooches, rings, necklaces, and bracelets decorated with intricate animal patterns. Wood carvers transformed ordinary objects into works of art, featuring dragons, serpents, wolves, birds, and complex geometric designs. These artistic traditions remain among the most recognizable symbols of Viking culture today. Perhaps no achievement demonstrated Viking ingenuity more than shipbuilding. The sea connected Scandinavia to distant lands. Success depended upon reliable vessels. Over generations, Viking shipbuilders perfected designs unlike any seen elsewhere in Europe. Using overlapping wooden planks fastened together with iron rivets, they created ships that were both lightweight and remarkably flexible. These vessels could survive rough ocean waves while remaining shallow enough to navigate rivers and even be carried short distances over land. Longships combined speed, strength, and versatility. Powered by both sails and oars, they could travel great distances across open seas before suddenly appearing along unfamiliar coastlines. Their dragon-headed prows became legendary symbols of Viking power. Merchant vessels, known as nars, were broader and designed to carry cargo rather than warriors. These ships transported timber, iron, furs, amber, walrus ivory, cloth, grain, and countless other goods across Europe. Trade became increasingly important. Long before famous Viking raids began, Scandinavian merchants established commercial networks connecting northern Europe with the Baltic region, the Frankish kingdoms, the British Isles, the Byzantine Empire, and even the Islamic world. Silver coins from the Abbasid Caliphate have been discovered in Viking settlements thousands of kilometers away, demonstrating the remarkable reach of these trade routes. Travel broadened Viking knowledge of geography and foreign cultures. Merchants returned home with exotic goods, new technologies, unfamiliar customs, and stories about wealthy kingdoms beyond Scandinavia. Many young men dreamed of seeking fortune overseas. Some hoped to become successful traders. Others desired land unavailable in crowded farming communities. Still others sought glory through warfare. Several factors encouraged expansion. Population gradually increased. Good farmland remained limited. Competition among local leaders intensified. Growing shipbuilding expertise made longer voyages possible than ever before. Opportunity lay beyond the horizon. Across the North Sea, monasteries, towns, and kingdoms possessed wealth that seemed unimaginable to many Scandinavian communities. The stage was quietly being set for one of history's most dramatic periods of exploration and expansion. Within only a few generations, Viking ships would appear unexpectedly on distant shores. Their arrival would astonish Europe. Some would come as merchants, some as settlers, some as explorers, and others as warriors whose sudden raids would become legendary. The age of the Vikings was about to begin. The year was AD 793. Along the northeastern coast of England, the island monastery of Lindisfarne stood as one of the holiest places in the Christian world. Monks spent their days praying, copying manuscripts by hand, and caring for travelers who arrived from distant lands. Protected only by faith and the surrounding sea, few imagined that danger could arrive so suddenly. Then, one morning, strange ships appeared on the horizon. Unlike the broad merchant vessels familiar to local sailors, these ships were long, narrow, and incredibly fast. Their colorful sails caught the wind as dragon-headed prows cut through the waves. Dozens of armed men leapt ashore, carrying axes, swords, spears, and round shields. The attack was swift and devastating. The monastery's treasures, gold, silver, jeweled crosses, and precious manuscripts were taken. Buildings were burned, monks were killed or captured, and survivors fled in terror. News of the raid spread rapidly across Europe. To many Christian chroniclers, it seemed like divine punishment. To the Scandinavians who carried out the raid, it was an opportunity. The attack on Lindisfarne is traditionally regarded as the beginning of the Viking Age. though Scandinavian traders and smaller raiding parties had traveled abroad before. What made this event so significant was the shock it created throughout Europe. For the first time, kingdoms realized that these northern seafarers possessed ships capable of crossing open seas with remarkable speed. The Vikings had arrived. Word of Lindisfarne's wealth quickly reached Scandinavia. More expeditions followed. Monasteries became common targets because they often contained valuable objects made of gold and silver, while lacking strong military defenses. Yet the Vikings did not attack solely out of greed. Many expeditions also sought food, livestock, tools, and supplies needed for long voyages. Not every Viking who sailed abroad was a warrior. Many were merchants. Others were explorers searching for fertile land. Some intended to settle permanently rather than return home. The image of Vikings as only raiders tells only part of their story. Their greatest advantage was their ships. A Viking longship could travel across the open Atlantic, navigate shallow rivers, and even be pulled over short stretches of land between waterways. This flexibility allowed Viking crews to strike deep inland, reaching towns that believed themselves safe from coastal attacks. European rulers struggled to respond. By the time defenders assembled, Viking ships often disappeared back into the sea. Speed became their greatest weapon. Raids soon spread beyond England. The coastlines of Ireland, Scotland, and Wales experienced repeated attacks. Monasteries, trading centers, and villages became frequent targets. Some communities paid tribute in hopes of avoiding destruction. Others attempted to strengthen defenses by constructing walls and watchtowers. The Vikings constantly adapted. If one region became heavily defended, they simply sailed elsewhere. France, then ruled by the Frankish kingdoms, soon experienced repeated Viking raids. The great rivers of Europe became highways for Viking fleets. Longships traveled up the Seine, Loire, Rhine, and other rivers, reaching cities far from the coast. Even Paris, one of the Frankish kingdom's most important cities, faced Viking attacks. In AD 445, a fleet led by the legendary Viking leader Ragnar Lothbrok, according to later traditions, sailed up the Seine and attacked Paris. Although historians continue debating Ragnar's historical role, Viking forces undeniably reached the city. The Frankish king ultimately paid a large ransom to persuade the attackers to leave. Such payments became known as Danegeld. For many rulers, paying silver seemed less costly than fighting. However, these payments sometimes encouraged further raids. The Vikings recognized that wealthy kingdoms might prefer negotiation over prolonged warfare. Meanwhile, in Ireland, Viking activity evolved beyond seasonal raids. Instead of simply attacking coastal settlements, they established permanent bases. One of these settlements eventually became Dublin, which grew into one of the most important trading cities in the Viking world.
From there, merchants exchanged slaves, furs, amber, cloth, weapons, silver, and countless other goods with traders from across Europe. Trade and conquest often went hand in hand. The same ships that carried warriors one year might transport merchants the next. Many Viking leaders discovered that stable trade could produce wealth more reliably than constant warfare. Back in Scandinavia, success overseas brought prestige. Warriors who returned with silver, jewelry, weapons, and exotic goods gained influence within their communities. Young men eager for adventure joined future expeditions, hoping to achieve similar success. Not every voyage ended in battle. Some crews traveled peacefully, establishing commercial relationships with distant peoples. Scandinavian merchants became familiar faces in markets stretching from England to the Byzantine Empire. They traded walrus ivory from the Arctic, high-quality iron, timber, furs, honey, wax, and beautifully crafted jewelry. In return, they acquired silk, spices, glassware, wine, silver coins, and luxury goods unavailable in Northern Europe. These exchanges connected Scandinavia to an international economy spanning thousands of miles. The Vikings also pushed farther west into the North Atlantic than almost anyone before them. Norwegian sailors discovered and settled the Faroe Islands, followed by Iceland during the late 9th century. Unlike many earlier raids, Iceland offered something different: land. Families crossed the ocean carrying livestock, farming equipment, and household goods. They established independent farms, built longhouses, and created one of the world's oldest parliamentary institutions, the Althing, around AD 930. The Althing allowed Icelandic leaders to settle disputes and establish laws through regular assemblies. It reflected the Viking tradition of community decision-making that had existed for centuries in Scandinavia. Further west still lay another remarkable discovery. Around AD 982, the Norwegian explorer Erik the Red, after being exiled from Iceland, sailed farther into the Atlantic and reached Greenland. Recognizing that the island's southern coast contained areas suitable for farming during summer months, Erik deliberately gave it an attractive name: Greenland. Many historians believe the name encouraged additional settlers to follow. Several hundred Viking families eventually established communities there. Despite the harsh climate, they raised livestock, hunted seals, and traded valuable walrus ivory with Europe. Yet, the spirit of exploration did not end there. Around 1000 AD, Erik's son, Leif Erikson, sailed even farther west. According to the Icelandic sagas, he reached a land rich in forest and natural resources which he called Vinland. Modern archaeological discoveries at L'Anse aux Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada, confirm that Norse explorers established a settlement in North America approximately 5 centuries before Christopher Columbus reached the Caribbean. Although the Vinland settlement lasted only a short time, it remains one of history's greatest achievements in exploration. The Vikings had crossed the Atlantic Ocean. While Norwegian Vikings explored westward, Swedish Vikings increasingly turned east. Following great river systems through present-day Russia and Ukraine, they established extensive trade routes connecting Scandinavia with the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. These eastern Vikings became known as the Varangians. Traveling along rivers such as the Dnieper and Volga, they reached the powerful Byzantine Empire, whose capital, Constantinople, astonished northern visitors with its magnificent churches, massive walls, bustling markets, and extraordinary wealth. Some Varangians entered the service of Byzantine emperors. Their reputation for courage and loyalty led to the formation of the famous Varangian Guard, an elite military unit that protected the emperor himself. For many Scandinavian warriors, serving in Constantinople brought wealth, prestige, and experience unavailable at home. As Viking influence expanded, so did their interactions with different cultures. They encountered Christians, Muslims, Slavic peoples, Celtic kingdoms, and nomadic tribes from the Eurasian steppes. These contacts introduced new ideas, technologies, artistic styles, and religious beliefs into Scandinavian society. The Viking world became far more connected than many people realized. It stretched from North America to Central Asia, from the Arctic Ocean to North Africa. Yet, expansion also brought new challenges. Successful raids encouraged stronger European defenses. Kings strengthened armies. Fortified towns multiplied. Political leaders began uniting fragmented kingdoms to resist Viking attacks more effectively. Meanwhile, Scandinavia itself was changing. Local chiefs competed for greater power. Small kingdoms gradually merged into larger states. Christian missionaries traveled north, introducing a new religion that challenged ancient Norse beliefs. The age of constant expansion was reaching its peak. Ahead lay the stories of legendary Viking rulers and explorers, figures whose names would echo through history. Some remembered through historical records, others preserved in epic sagas where legend and reality became forever intertwined. As the Viking world reached the height of its power during the 10th and early 11th centuries, Scandinavia was no longer a collection of isolated farming communities led only by local chiefs. Stronger kingdoms were emerging in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. Kings sought to unite rival clans under a single crown, replacing centuries of regional competition with centralized authority. This transformation would gradually reshape Viking society forever. Among the most influential rulers was Harald Fairhair, who, according to later Norse traditions, united much of Norway during the late 9th century. Although some details of his life remain debated by historians, he became a powerful symbol of Norway's unification. As royal authority expanded, many independent chieftains left Norway rather than submit to a king, helping to drive further settlement in Iceland and other distant lands. In Denmark, Harald Bluetooth strengthened royal control while introducing Christianity to his kingdom during the 10th century. The modern Bluetooth wireless technology is named after him because he united different regions of Denmark, much as the technology connects different devices today. His conversion marked an important turning point. For centuries, Scandinavians had worshipped Odin, Thor, Freya, and the other Norse gods. Gradually, however, Christian missionaries gained influence. Some kings embraced Christianity for political reasons, strengthening relationships with neighboring Christian kingdoms and increasing their own authority. The transition was slow. For many years, old and new beliefs existed side by side. People continued wearing Thor's hammer pendants, even as crosses became increasingly common. Traditional festivals blended with Christian celebrations. Ancient customs survived alongside new religious practices. One of the greatest Viking rulers was Cnut the Great. Born in Denmark, Cnut conquered England in 1016 and eventually ruled an empire including England, Denmark, Norway, and parts of Sweden. Unlike many earlier Viking leaders remembered mainly for raids, Cnut proved to be an effective administrator. He maintained law and order, encouraged trade, respected local traditions, and supported the Christian church. His reign demonstrated how Viking rulers had evolved from raiders into kings, governing complex states. Yet, even as some Vikings built kingdoms, others continued seeking glory through exploration and warfare. One of the last great Viking warriors was Harald Hardrada. Before becoming king of Norway, Harald spent years serving in the famous Varangian Guard of the Byzantine Empire. He fought battles across Eastern Europe and the Mediterranean, gaining wealth and military experience unlike almost any other Scandinavian leader. Returning home, Harald eventually claimed the Norwegian throne. Ambitious and determined, he sought even greater glory. In 1066, he launched an invasion of England, believing he had a legitimate claim to its crown. His army landed in northern England and initially achieved success. However, King Harold Godwinson rapidly marched north with the English army. On September 25, 1066, the two forces met at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. The fighting was fierce. According to tradition, a lone Viking warrior defended a narrow bridge against numerous English soldiers before finally being defeated. Whether entirely true or partly legendary, the story reflects the courage associated with Viking warriors. Harald Hardrada himself was killed during the battle. His death is often regarded by historians as marking the end of the Viking Age. Only weeks later, another invasion changed English history forever. William, Duke of Normandy, himself descended from Viking settlers who had established Normandy in France generations earlier, defeated King Harold at the Battle of Hastings. Ironically, although the Viking Age had ended, Viking descendants continued shaping European history. As Christianity spread across Scandinavia, many traditional Norse religious practices gradually disappeared. Wooden temples dedicated to Odin and Thor were replaced by churches. Runic inscriptions became less common as the Latin alphabet spread. Kings strengthened governments, collected taxes, and established permanent legal systems. Trade remained important, but seasonal raiding declined significantly. Several factors contributed to the end of the Viking Age.
European kingdoms had become stronger and better organized. Castles, fortified towns, and professional armies made surprise attacks far more difficult. Christianity changed Scandinavian society. Political unification reduced internal competition among Viking leaders. Economic opportunities increasingly favored commerce over warfare. Although the Viking Age ended, Viking influence did not disappear. Their settlements transformed regions across Europe. In England, thousands of place names still reveal Scandinavian origins. Words such as sky, egg, window, knife, husband, law, and they entered the English language through Old Norse. Modern English carries unmistakable traces of Viking speech. The Normans, descendants of Vikings who settled in northern France, conquered England in 1066 and profoundly influenced English government, law, language, and culture. In Ireland, cities including Dublin, Waterford, Wexford, Limerick, and Cork owe much of their early urban development to Viking settlements. In Eastern Europe, Scandinavian traders helped establish important trade networks linking the Baltic Sea with the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic world. Some historians believe early Scandinavian leaders influenced the formation of the medieval state known as Kievan Rus, though this remains a subject of historical research and debate. Perhaps the Vikings' greatest achievement was exploration. They reached Iceland, they settled Greenland, they crossed the Atlantic to North America around 5 centuries before Columbus. They sailed rivers deep into Eastern Europe, they reached Constantinople, they traded with the Islamic caliphates. Few civilizations of their time matched such extraordinary geographical reach. Modern archaeology continues revealing new insights into Viking life. Excavations of longhouses, burial ships, tools, jewelry, weapons, and settlements show that the Vikings were far more than raiders. They were skilled farmers, master shipbuilders, talented blacksmiths, successful merchants, explorers driven by curiosity, poets who preserved heroic sagas, craftsmen whose artistic designs remain admired today. Recent scientific research has also shown that Viking society was more diverse than once believed. Trade, migration, and settlement connected Scandinavia with many different peoples across Europe and beyond. The Viking world was dynamic, adaptable, and constantly changing. Popular culture has often portrayed Vikings wearing horned helmets. In reality, historians have found no convincing evidence that Viking warriors commonly wore such helmets in battle. The famous horned image originated largely from 19th century artistic interpretations and later theatrical productions. Real Viking helmets were practical, designed for protection rather than decoration. Their longships remain among history's greatest engineering achievements. Built with overlapping planks and flexible construction, they allowed Vikings to navigate oceans, rivers, and shallow waters with remarkable efficiency. These ships made exploration possible on an unprecedented scale. Today, museums across Scandinavia preserve original Viking ships, weapons, jewelry, and everyday objects, allowing visitors to better understand this remarkable civilization. The Icelandic sagas continue preserving stories of explorers, kings, and warriors, blending historical events with legendary traditions. Although historians carefully distinguish documented history from myth, these stories remain invaluable cultural treasures. More than 1,000 years after the first longships appeared off the coast of Lindisfarne, the legacy of the Vikings continued to fascinate the world. Their courage carried them across unknown seas. Their craftsmanship produced masterpieces of wood, iron, and stone. Their curiosity expanded the known boundaries of the medieval world. Their influence shaped languages, kingdoms, trade routes, and cultures across Europe. The Vikings were not simply fearless warriors from the frozen north. They were explorers who reached new continents, merchants who connected distant civilizations, rulers who built kingdoms, and innovators whose achievements transformed history. Their age eventually came to an end, but their story never truly did. Every reconstructed longship, every carved runestone, every archaeological discovery and every surviving saga reminds us that beyond the legends stood real men and women whose determination, resilience, and spirit of adventure changed the course of history forever.